across 3 different generations that have been in tech for decades, in gaming, in human resources, in startups, Dr. Dre, Silicon Valley. So it's a really interesting group. And obviously it's kind of an intimate setting, so that just will make it more fascinating. What I'd love to do before we get started is how many people in this room that are women that are already in technology field? Okay, so we have a few hands. And how many people want to get into tech? Okay. And how many women in the room have an idea for a startup and actually want to run their own company?
I was recruiting.
Excellent. This is a dynamic panel. Fantastic. Okay, so the panel that we're going to talk about is bringing more women into tech and breaking down the barriers to entry. And I will briefly introduce myself, and then I'm going to go through the panel. So my name is Melinda Moore. I've been in tech for 20 years. I've been an entrepreneur. I've had a couple companies. The last company I had was called Loving Eco. I sold that to John Paul DeGioia, the guy that runs Patron, and Paul Mitchell. Then I did some investing. I wrote a couple checks in angel investing in female-backed companies, so female founders. And I started a company called Tuesday Nights, which is to help women across all different verticals. So I'm definitely a proponent of getting more women into tech, and I have had the privilege to meet these women today. And so we're going to start with Jill. Jill, can you tell us a little bit about your background, what you do, and then a little bit of the journey of you getting into tech and what that was like?
Sure. So my name is Jill Wilson. I am the Senior Vice President of Game Development for a social mobile game company called SGN. And I got into tech when I was working in the board game industry, and I knew the founder of our company, and he was raising capital to start this big gaming company roll up. And he said, the future is social gaming. You have to move across the country and join us. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. So I did, and I was the second employee of our company and have helped grow it into one of the top mobile game developers of today.
Thank you. Susan?
I'm Susan Paley. I was the first employee of Beats by Dre, built the company, was now sold to Apple. I am now consulting for General Motors. I'm working with Bill Gross at Idea Lab on a startup and also advising a couple startup companies. My journey, as with most journeys, is circuitous. I started in entertainment many, many years ago and really didn't like it. The internet was just starting, and I said, I think I might try that. So in the late 90s, I went through the first wave of all the internet startups. And then I ended up working for the first incubators, and then went into more of the traditional sort of CE tech companies, and then found my way to meet with Jimmy and Dre, and sort of the rest is kind of history.
Thank you. Suni?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sunny Pavlovic. I'm the studio manager at that game company, and we're based here in Santa Monica. And we're best known for creating artistically crafted interactive entertainment experiences that appeal to a broad market. My jump into tech or video games my background was in film and TV, and I myself play games. And what inspired me about film, I saw was possible in games, and that you can really reach a lot of people and affect their lives by telling stories or just creating these warm experiences. And when I realized that, I saw how big gaming was growing, and I was like, that's where I need to be. So that's where I am now today.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Bedford. I'm an executive recruiter. I sort of came into the business traditionally by way of one of those big companies called Korn Ferry International, and was doing the entertainment and media side of the house. Much like Susan, I took one look at the internet at one point and went, oh, yeah, I'm gonna go with that. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm going to go with it. And I've been an independent executive recruiter ever since. I'm now with an investor-backed small search boutique based here in Los Angeles. Most of our clients are Los Angeles, Silicon Valley, Seattle, West Coast, national. I'm really interested in watching the trends of recruiting, and very happy to be here today. I hope we can be helpful to all of you.
Thank you. And Nancy?
Hello, I'm Nancy Hauge. And I am currently the head of human resources for a company called Silicon Image. And you guys don't know Silicon Image, although you know our product. Inside your TV is something called HDMI, and that is our technology. So what Silicon Image does is it fills blank screens with the joy of connection. I've been there 2 years. I am older than all of these ladies combined. So I'll go very fast through a lot of history. I started as a comedy writer and a stand-up comic, and married an actor, singer. And eventually someone had to get a real job, and I lost the toss. So my husband's career brought me to Silicon Valley 30 years ago when he was offered 12 weeks of work singing all the jingles for a theme park. I didn't want to be separated, and so I answered an ad for a company that said it made workstations. I thought that was office furniture. It was Sun Microsystems. And so I started with Sun when they were doing $1 million a month in revenue. I left when they were doing $1 million every 90 minutes. I loved that kind of rocket ship ride, and so I've had the privilege of doing many other startups, including Gymboree, Noah's New York Bagels. I founded 2 storage technology companies. One I sold to Western Digital, one to Adaptec. I then went on to do consulting, venture capital. I helped K-12, the largest online education company, go public as their VP of HR, then helped Rosetta Stone go public, and then Motricity. I think I've done 7 IPOs in my career. I've raised about $400 million for companies that I've worked with, and hired over 23,000 people into technology. I know nothing about technology. I'm like a dog watching TV when you talk about technology. What I love is technologists.
Mm. Thank you.
You go, girl.
So I'm kind of going to open it up, and I'm going to actually go back to Nancy. Again, we're gonna kind of shake this up, which is, Nancy's been in the industry for so long, and she does help people navigate their careers. And so what I'd love to kind of open up this discussion is, what are the things that you've really learned that are a bit different about women's behavior, and then some of the changes that you've actually made within the human resource system to see women excel at a much faster rate in the technology field?
So whenever a woman asks me what's the most important thing she can do in her career, I always say, wear the most expensive perfume you can buy. Because you really want people to enjoy sitting next to you in meetings. You just don't want to, you don't want to choke them. You want them to remember you fondly. So that's the first thing. In terms of how women have changed, what the role of women and the experience of women over, and it's 30 years now that I've been kind of watching this. Obviously, there is a different generation in charge. There's a different attitude toward women than there was 30 years ago. Not as profoundly different as I would like to see. I think we haven't changed quite as much. One of the ways I try to level the playing field when I go into a company is, and I mentioned this when we were at lunch today, is I abandon performance evaluations. Performance evaluations were written as we see them today in the workplace. They were written for the U.S. military during World War II. Mm-hmm. So it's a 70-year-old technology, 70-year-old methodology was designed around how to make 19-year-old boys successful. I don't hire any 19-year-old boys. So, but what I've discovered is once I got rid of competence-based and all those attributes everybody wants to manage and that stupid bell curve, once we got rid of all that stuff and instead looked at our workforce based on 2 things. Do you keep your commitments, and do I think you have potential? And we lay people out on a 9-grid matrix around potential and performance. Once we did that, women started moving up and to the right into the high performer, high potential box. Once we got rid of all those little attributes that were much more based around how men use their brains at work, the whole system was designed for men to be successful. Once we got rid of that, parsing out the male brain into those attributes and could make room for the feminine brain to excel, we see women moving into the director ranks. We see women being promoted to vice presidents. And so there are gates that are embedded in the cultures of companies because people think those are best practices. I got to tell you, anything that's 70 years old, you ought to be thinking about doing differently.
Thank you. Jennifer, do you have anything to kind of add just in general to that discussion?
Well, we had an interesting talk at lunch about how what you're looking at up here is sort of 3 generations of human resource expertise, of executive recruiting, of functional operational developments. And from my chair, where I sit across the table from corporate hiring clients, an observation that I've seen over the last 15 years is we used to have clients say, I'd like a woman candidate. I'd like a diversity candidate. Boy, a candidate of color would be great. And our observation today is that I see less of that. I'm very infrequently asked for a woman candidate, a candidate of color. It's just, here's the job description. Let's find the best person for the job, recruit to that. And I open this open question to all of us today to look at that, because I don't know that I have a philosophy yet on, is that good news or is that not good news? We haven't really figured it. Is it great news because we now only are gender blind and color blind and want the best person for the job, or have we forgotten? And that is an open question.
Right. And then, like you said, when you look at the management team as you're doing it, and if you see all males 40 to 50 that are Caucasian, then
that is right. That does color the marketplace. So if we have final candidates, say, for a big job at company XYZ, they're going to pull up that management page and go, oh, wow, no one looks like me. That is a whole lot of suits and a whole lot of red ties. And where's my place in that? So these are all open questions that we look at every day. And I don't have a theory as to, is this good news or is this just news?
Susan, do you want to comment on that? Just in terms of things that you've seen and ways that you've tried to encourage more women to come into technology?
I mean, when I was hiring, so it was more, it beats when you were trying to build an entire engineering organization really quickly. It was about really the talent pool that was existing down here and what didn't exist. So we found down here, we were able to pull a lot of people out of defense. There's a lot of great people who are working in the defense industry that want to get into tech and don't want the rigidity, and they want to bring products to market instead of in 3 to 5 to 8 years to 9 to 12 months. What we did find is certain skill sets like firmware and things like that we had to go up north for, which is really kind of a tough thing when you're trying to hire a company, of trying to get the whole idea of some of the software or the preconceived notions of software expertise up north. And obviously a lot of those people don't want to come down south. But it really wasn't, I was really surprised when we were talking about this at lunch. I pulled a lot of people out of Northrop Grumman and a couple of the other big engineering defense contractors. And they brought a lot of women with them because they found that, like, especially systems engineers, project managers, women were just as effective and oftentimes more effective than men. Women can multitask. They also can, there's not as much drama when they're looking at just kind of the day-to-day of getting things done. So it was really nice. We never had to have the conversation of, God, why is every person coming in here a guy and why don't we have any women? And we also had a very diverse group of really a range of color, a range of age. So it actually worked out quite well.
That's nice. And Sunny, are you the only woman female at your company? Is that right?
Currently the only full-time, yeah. And our team is 13 people. So it's me and a lot of men.
Right. And what do you do within the culture to kind of encourage there to be more women brought into the company?
Right. So it's become a personal mission of mine to bring more women, or just balance out what I see within the company itself. And so that's one of those top priorities in my mind right now. So within gaming, we don't get a high number of developers applying who are women. And so I have to go and reach out to relevant industries where they have the same or similar skill set, for example, animation or film, things like that, art, and go, hey, you seem really talented. You have an amazing portfolio. Like, we should talk. So that's one of the things I do. And just being mindful of what are the needs. Personally, I think that building a great workplace for women is just building a great workplace for people. I think people generally have just needs. They want to work at a nice place with nice people.
And both Jill and Sunny come from gaming too, which are traditionally very male-dominated. And as a result, they're both asked all the time to become, the recruiter of women, which is so funny, isn't it? Now, if you're a woman, you must know how to recruit them then and bring them into our company, surely.
Actually, that's a really good point, because now I'm putting pressure back on my colleagues to go, hey, if you're serious about hiring for diversity, like you need to do this. Like you got to talk the talk and walk the walk. It can't just be me. I'm only one person, but we have a team of people.
So another question, just to open it up to whoever feels free to want to respond. But one of the things that we're talking about over lunch is that sometimes we can be our own enemy and we can make personal sacrifices, because in a way we feel like in order to get ahead, we have to do this. And so part of that is cultural. Why do we feel that we have to do that? And the other part is, why are we doing that? Why aren't we just standing up and saying, no, I can't do that. It doesn't, at this time, it doesn't work for me. Or, why don't we push back to kind of protect our own individual self and our own health and our own integrity? So opening that up.
This is one of those things that hasn't changed enough over 30 years. The concept of women who say, I have to be twice as good, or at least, I have to be twice as good in order to get the same career as a man would have. And then what happens is we get into a habit of thinking that we've got to be the super person all the time because, and my theory is that there is a low self-esteem among women that makes us think that all of our good works to date will be forgotten if we miss one deadline, if we don't attend one meeting. Susan has to tell her story because it is a prime example of how, I think a rational man would have not done what you did.
Okay, so I'm the worst offender of this, right? So we're talking about women and empowerment. I'm like, so then I did this really bad thing. I was adopting a child from Ethiopia. And for those of you who ever have taken the plane flight from Ethiopia to LA with a kid you've known for 3 days who's 14 months, it's really tough. It's hard to even explain how hard it is. So I got off the plane and English was no longer my first language. I was so exhausted. And that was on a Sunday. On Monday, I had to go give a board meeting. I had to give a board presentation. And I didn't stand up and say, you know what, this probably isn't a great time for me to do that. I've just come home with a child from Ethiopia. But I did it because I was so afraid not to be a contributing part of the senior management team. And no one, so the issue, that the rub is that I was complicit in this kind of bad situation. No one said to me, hey, you know what? You don't need to do this board. I mean, that's crazy. You just came home from Ethiopia with a child. So part of it, it's like there's a complicit aspect of it where you have to set your own boundaries. You also have to really be aware of whatever company you're working in or a company that you're starting, setting up the right environment for you and for your employees to say, okay, there is a such thing as work-life balance. Take family into consideration, take children into consideration. You will get a lot more productive work out of your employees. I mean, this is something I think that Google is really good at. The best companies, they understand how to treat employees, how employees will work twice as hard if they feel they're being treated well. And that's beyond gender.
Mm-hmm. I think also when you're working in a really competitive industry where it's so easy for other companies to come in and sweep your talent, if they're just coming in with maybe a higher salary, but if your employees really like where they're working and they believe in what you do, it's also good for the bottom line. Like you're retaining your top talent.
Mm-hmm. And I think high tech has a particular duality to it. And one is that while it is extremely male dominated, I mean, you just take a look at the numbers. It's very male dominated. By the same token, as we were talking about at lunch, it's also probably the most profound meritocracy on earth. And so if you are good at what you do, if you are smart, and if you are committed, you will be rewarded and you can build great careers. It doesn't matter what your physicality, doesn't matter what your gender is. I think the issue is, though, that as women, we deny our own value every time we do something that says we're kind of desperate for the attention or we're desperate to prove ourselves, that we deny our own value. And that often it's drawing that boundary actually says, I value myself, you should too. It sends the message about how we value ourselves. And I think that women, when I started in my career in high tech, the concept of tap dancing as fast as you can every single minute to compete was absolutely what every girl did. Today, I would hope that we would get to a point that we could say, my value is intrinsic. People have seen it. I've demonstrated it. I do not have to worry that it'll be eclipsed by not going to one meeting. But I think we still do carry that with us.
Go ahead. Sure.
I have several questions. Let me start with a simple one. I'm in the process of unfolding a new database platform. I'm attending this conference just kind of as a visitor, but this forum is connecting with me more profoundly than the other sessions have. I'm trying right now to hire a Linux Debian system administrator. Now, how many resumes do you think I've seen from women? And so my question is, I would like to know, I guess two of you at least are HR people. One admitted doesn't know tech. What are your technical backgrounds? What languages do you know? What systems do you know? Do you have an engineering degree or math degree or what? And so I'd like to ask the panel that question, and also tell me, why can't I would love to hire a female. I would love to have a gender balance on my staff, but it's very hard when I have to hire a Pascal programmer and whatever these particular needs that I have. And it's like, where are they? Where are the women? And my other question, I'll just throw it all out. Why is there no one on this panel from India?
Pascal, maybe in 1980.
Yeah, I was going to say hello.
So
82 called. They want their language back.
I'll start. So I face that problem. First of all, I have no technical engineering skills whatsoever. But I do manage engineers and I hire them, and I can't find a lot of resumes for women to fill those roles. I look for them and I would love to fill them, but I think that the real answer to your question is not a short-term fix. It's a longer-term fix of reaching out to people who are in college now and before, and getting women to understand that these careers are accessible to them. They can be good at this, and it's going to take a long time. But once that starts to shift, then there will be more resumes and our lives will be a lot easier.
Looking for resumes suggests, by the way, that you're just it's a kind of a little antiquated. You have to go find them on LinkedIn and social media. You've got to go pull them. It's a pull world. People don't send their resumes out like they used to. They're not looking in the same way, and particularly women engineers. Any woman, hello, that's a visitor. Any woman with those technology capabilities and credentials, what you have to realize is what demand they're in, and therefore they get sucked up into the world very quick. Google and Facebook and a whole bunch of people can throw tons of money at them, take them very quickly off the market. So you have to go find. I love hearing that you do, and I would just put your criteria together and then figure out how to do the advanced search on LinkedIn. You'll find some people. So,
and to Sunny's smart point earlier, look at companies who do something that's interesting. Look at companies who are creating product that's correlatable to what you're looking for. And and then dig deep within those companies to find the women who are doing.
I think there's a lot of universities here, and you're going to need to go to the universities. Caltech is a great place.
Right.
You can go out of UCLA. You look at where the strong sort of science, applied math programs are. And also I found that I'm working with one of these applied math PhDs who literally wrote a thesis. I didn't understand one word of the thesis in terms of the title. But going to him, talking to him, and then they all have networks. So it's really getting into people at university in the graduate level and undergraduate level, and that will help you find the people that you're looking for.
Yeah, I would say similar to that, the network effect. If you can't find that database programmer who's a woman, are there any roles that you could fill that could be like, you could get more women into your company, and you start creating a culture that is, welcoming to women, and, the word gets out. It sounds funny, but you start wherever you can and you grow from there. And it's a long-term thing.
I'll just throw one more out there because I've had success here. In almost any major market, there's a really strong women in tech meetup community.
Right.
Meetup communities are also a great way to network.
Right. And I think just to add to that too, it's a long-term issue. So it's getting young girls through Women Who Code, and there's a bunch of organizations that are going out there where they're trying to get women to understand that, if you like math, embrace it. Don't go to, don't study necessarily business, but maybe engineering, and starting to get more young girls and young adults into embracing careers within engineering so that they actually understand the opportunity that presents, as well as all of the resources that are truly available online. So I think part of it is an education process, and we need to change the language. And there are some countries that are doing a better job. So as Nancy had pointed out, there's, I think, 25% of engineers in India are women.
Yeah.
So sure, of course. So yeah, go ahead.
At Silicon Image, 25% of our engineering workforce in India is female. You know, that's, and then of course in Shanghai, it is about 15%, 10 to 15%. In Sunnyvale, it's a single digit. You know, now I think about this from my perspective. When I graduated from high school, the girls who graduated with me, if you were good at math or science, you were encouraged to be a teacher. And if you're really good, you're encouraged to be a high school teacher. And if you just really loved it, then you should be a nurse. I mean, you know, and it was 10 years after I graduated from high school that girls started to figure out that they could study computer science and they could get a double E. And, you know, we're way behind on this. Now in India, they figured it out earlier. I mean, they're graduating so many more engineers and lots of women. But the reason I don't think you see any women from India sitting up here is I think that there are other social imperatives in that culture about balance of work life. And so women from India have not climbed through the ranks into the leadership ranks. You see, have a lot of very ambitious women sitting up here. And so it's not behavioralized yet. So I don't find as many directors of engineering from India that are women. You don't find them yet.
I don't know why.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
We'll live and born, brought up, and moved here, you know, for undergraduate school, and have grown up in technology, and now work for a bank, which is an institution and a government in itself. You pick whichever bank you want to do. The reason you won't find a lot of Indian women is, one, it is a socially cultural difference. When you're to an engineering, you know, even if your parents, everybody says, go study, go get a career. But then you get married into cultures where they go, it's time for you to have kids. So you see the growth really, really well till about that mid-manager level.
Right.
But then the expectation is that you turn it around and now you're home. You're not the big breadwinner.
Right.
And that I think is really important, because in my line, as you know, in banking, at a senior management level, I still don't come across any women who are Indian, be it living born here or coming from India. You don't see it because it's just not a cultural norm. And so you see a lot of good worker bees, they call it, but you won't see that rise in management. It just doesn't happen.
Even in India, a year ago, I questioned the engineers we had there, the female engineers. Whenever I'm there, I meet with the women. We want to make certain it's a great work environment for women. And a year ago, I asked them, how many of you see yourself as a CTO, a VP of engineering, or a CEO? No hands. No hands. And, you know, and by the way, among the women in that environment, we have more PhDs among the women than we do among the men. I mean, that commitment to the education is really profound. It's, you know, cultural imperative. This year, 3 hands went up. And so just within a year, 3 young women are like, well, I don't know. Maybe I would. Maybe I could, you know, just, it's going to be hard for them to bump up against all that pressure from the culture. But fabulous. I mean, in terms of the education, in terms of the engineering capability, it's amazing what's coming out of India today. What's staying home in India, I should say.
I know a lot of female Indian grad students who are studying engineering.
Recruit them into your database.
But they don't have the experience.
There you go.
I also wanted to mention that working in tech doesn't, like, as some of us, you don't need a technical background. It doesn't mean you're less of a person working in tech. These are whole industries. They need all kinds of people, and helping keeping them balanced is also filling out all the different roles with all different kinds of people.
Right, and I'll give a fact. So organizations more inclusive to women in top management achieve 35% higher ROI and 34% better return to shareholders. And in addition to that, women-operated venture-backed high-tech companies average 12% higher annual revenues and use on average 1/3 less capital than male counterpart startups. So it really kind of points to the fact is that when you do include women in much more senior roles, you're actually creating efficiencies and resourcefulness. So love to have the panel kind of talk about that.
Yeah, we talked about resourcefulness, just that somehow our gender is better at figuring out how to do it, spending less money, using less resources, involving more of a team. And it does become a gender conversation, doesn't it? That reaching out and pulling the team in and making sure people are fed and cared for and compensated. I loved that fact about resourcefulness as attached to gender. And we're seeing it obviously in real numbers and real data.
I think an interesting anecdote is that I don't know how many people are familiar with the Grameen Bank. It's a microfinance company, and the way that they organize groups of women in really small towns in impoverished places is they get a group of people together, and then you're all responsible if one person defaults on the loan. And in the studies that have been done about the Grameen Bank, women are exponentially off the charts more responsible with their loans, and so therefore are getting more of these microloans by far than men are. And it's because the women are spending the money towards what they said they were going to, the thing that they needed for their business. The men in these circumstances tend to sometimes make the decision to spend the money on themselves. But I think intrinsically, it's just an interesting anecdote that that's how the Grameen Bank has seen things working out.
And it's not it's not an either or competitive, it's not like, oh, women are better at this and men, suck at that. That's not, at all, I think, what's being set up here. I think the issue is that it's taken a very long time for us to be able to say out loud, we're different and we don't have to say we're all the same anymore. Women are hardwired differently than men. We do not have a work environment yet that truly understands how to take advantage. In some way. That's exactly right. So it's not like every man is single-threaded and can't multitask. That's not what we're saying at all. It's just women have some sort of inherent capability there. And if you built your work environment around being able to optimize for some of those feminine attributes, you'd have a far more effective and efficient work environment. We were talking about a little bit about innovation and that there is a tendency among male-dominated environments for ideas to get killed pretty quickly. Let me tell you what the problem is with that. I mean, that's the language. With female-dominated environments, ideas get a longer time to gestate. Mm-hmm. They get a little more nurturing. And so logically, you might say that having a few more women in product development teams may give you more runway for innovation. And so that's one of those things that, I think we all try to grapple with and say, how do you create environments that really optimize for that hard wiring for both gender? And right now, we're just behind it in terms of women. We haven't even really had the courage to state what all those attributes are.
A question from the back.
Hey, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about recruiting people from other industries for those like project management type roles. And I come out of traditional Hollywood. I've been a film and television producer, and as I'm trying to position myself better in a more dynamic group of digital businesses, talking about things like content creation or content strategy. I mean, really what I'm doing is project management. And it is a lot of balancing the sort of creative processing business. And so I'm wondering if you have any words of advice on how to position that background to be more valuable in this space.
Well, I could take the question as the headhunter, but I bet Jill actually could really talk to that because that was your pivoting moment, right?
So two things. One is for myself, I pivoted from board games to social games, and really the thing that helped me pivot at the time I was doing business development was the same task that I was doing, but for this slightly different industry. So basically I just went and looked at, there was practically no industry at that point, but I looked at what existed in social gaming at that time and saw, oh, my skills fit in X, Y, and Z ways. So I'm going to talk about it through the lens of that industry, not, oh, when I made this board game and sold it into Walmart, X, Y, and Z happened. It's taking, okay, so when I was creating this game, I know you used the Scrum process, we used a different process, like just referencing that I understand the context, but showing that I knew what I was talking about. So the kind of more relevant thing though is that, so the industry I work in is very young. So there aren't many people who have more than 4 years of experience doing exactly mobile gaming. So we take a lot of people from console gaming and other types of industries that are close but not exact. And the main thing that I look for is, do they understand what we're doing? So do they have slightly relevant work experience, that they were really good in what they did, and understand the industry that we're in now? So as long as you demonstrate that you can walk in the door and hit the ground running and understand what people are talking about, and then can showcase how your work ties into that. I hope that's helpful.
And was your question that you're not a technologist, but you'd like to lean into this industry and step into it? Do some free work.
Yeah, I come from that type of background on the advertising side. So I oversaw client services for Trailer Park. And so I was hiring and building a team. And it is important to understand that there are efficiencies within production, so that if I'm shooting a commercial and at the same time that I can shoot the commercial, I can shoot a 15-second pre-roll. And so you can start to pick up the language of like, hey, I can really create some efficiencies here, because as we're at one single shoot, I'm going to shoot for 6 different ways. So you're like thinking ahead. So I was always looking for people that could kind of think outside of the box, and you understand how expensive production is, so that the more frames I can leverage and how I can tell that story in 30 seconds and 15 seconds and 10 seconds and 5 seconds. And now we've got Vine videos at 6 seconds. It's really important to understand how that medium works, and then how you can take your background, and then how you can actually bring a strategic advantage to that, and sort of talk in that language, speak that language, research like crazy. There's so much stuff to read online, internships, taking on some work so that you can actually speak to the work. And because I think one of the things now is like, well, what did you do? So resumes now are not just a Word document, but they're very much becoming like much more visual in nature. So taking advantage of that.
I would say 2 things, and again, I was unencumbered by any skills, knowledge, or ability when I came into high tech. I had 2 things I could do. My improv training has been the very best training for anything, because I can go with it. I can say yes, and the other thing is, you learn quick. But let me tell you what the number one thing I hear people recently, in the last 2 years, the number one thing I hear people talk about is, we're not telling that story well. Whether it's we're not telling the story to the investors, we're not telling the stories to the employees, we're not telling the story to our potential customers, to our partners. Corporate America has to have the skills to be able to tell a story about what it's doing. And so your background actually has huge application. It's, can you take your background and translate the skills you have into what they're looking for? And just knowing that storytelling is not something engineers are good at. And so you have these engineering-dominated technology companies, and think about the gamer guys. Of course, they could, they ultimately can, they're going to tell a story in their game, but it's not really their core competence. And so your ability to tell a story is actually extremely marketable. You just have to figure out how you're going to translate that into the technology you want to go into. And right now, all social media is about informing the world about ourselves. We want to tell our story. So every bit of technology that's designed around that is an enabler of telling the story. And everything that they do at Facebook says, how do we get another chapter of the people's story out there?
I'll just add one last thing to this. So there's a ton of branded content companies here that work multi-platform. So what you would look at is translating your skills of how can I create and develop content multi-platform? Because what you're going to say is like, I'm about the story, the content, and executing that, and I don't really care what platform it lives on.
Right.
The other thing you should look at is 3D. 3D is getting really big here. There's a lot of 3D immersive storytelling that's happening, and you're right at the very beginning. So they're going to want people from more traditional media roles to get into 3D to help them tell stories. And there's a couple companies, I think one of them at least is in Santa Monica. So I would look at those two. Question.
Yes, I have an interest in the longer term solution, the discussion that was we were talking about earlier, and this idea that more can be done in education, but in particular the idea of women talk shops was mentioned, and that I was intrigued by the idea of, is there enough outreach from corporates back into these talk shops or these community initiatives, or is it just the large corporates such as the Googles of the world who are doing this? But is there more that could be done, or is it being done?
Is that Tuesday nights? Are you pushing when you say talk shops?
Pushing Tuesday nights, but Tuesday nights is a classic example. And is there enough outreach, say, from companies such as the ones that you work for, to these organizations, wherever or equivalent, wherever they might be in the country? Is there more that could be done?
I would say, we're on the coasts, right? So in the coast lead everything. I had the lovely experience of being in St. Louis a few weeks ago at Marina, and I thought I was 50 years back in time.
Yes.
There's absolutely no way that companies like a lot of the Fortune 100s and 500s that are really not on the cutting edge of what's going on are having these same conversations. I'd say that all the leadership and what you're seeing in tech and what you're seeing is really, it's California. It could be a little bit of the triangle, North Carolina triangle, and New York and Boston. And that's really what you have. We're going to be the leaders, these two coasts, against everything else.
It's getting female leaders to attend those. The problem with, I hate to say it this way, but a bunch of individual contributors or mid-level managers networking together is that they're going to wait a long time for that to pay off. And how do you get women who are leaders to go and commit to that community? For a very long time, as a cynic, and I hate to say this about myself, I would say, the problem with the glass ceiling is any woman who bursts through it, first thing she does is call the repairman and not pull anybody else up with her. And I think that that's one of those things that it's taken a long time for women to understand, that hoarding power is not the best way to demonstrate you've got a lot. You've got a lot when you give it away. You've got a lot of gravitas, you've got a lot of reputation when you're willing to expand it and benefit other people with it. We've been a little slow in that. We also, unfortunately, in the 80s, developed a term that I just find reprehensible, which is networking. And it's after the old boys network. And the truth is, I don't know any old boy who didn't just make friends. And that's one of the things that we stop thinking about is you need to make friends, trust the people that you have as friends. They will lead you to other good people. But if you develop friendships, you don't develop relationships looking for reciprocity immediately, right? You don't look for the immediate gain out of it. You've got to really think about is this someone who adds to my thinking, and then how do I help them? But we've been slow in that. We also had a conversation at lunch a little bit about the fact that every woman has the burden of every other woman with her. And that, we are very quick, I think, as women to judge each other and say, oh, she screwed up and she's made all of us look bad. And yet we don't put quite as much effort in celebrating when a woman makes us all look really great, or when we don't spend enough time with each other. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll never do enough for that.
One more question.
A quick question for Jill or Cindy. With what's going on with Gamergate and Anita and Brianna, how are you dealing with that either internally at your organizations, and how do you see that reflected in terms of hiring? How do you deal with it from both an HR perspective and in terms of recruitment, and any of your personal experiences within the gaming community related to that?
Yeah, Jill
should
and I
we
were talking about that.
So does everyone know what Gamergate is?
No.
Should we just give some context to
Yes.
it? So it's a very overblown, crazy situation right now, basically involving some female gaming journalists and some female independent game makers who are now receiving rape and death threats online that are very specific, including their address, because they were trying to show women in a positive light in games, or advocate that there should be more positive reflection of women in games. It started based on a couples conflict. We don't have to go far back into it. I recommend you look at it. But that's what you need to know for the context of this conversation.
I think it's been generally, it's a negative thing that's happening, but I think because you asked what are we doing within the studio, because it's been so consistently been in the news and on my mind and I've been thinking about it and like, what are the implications? It's sort of fueled me even further to want to hire more women and just sort of like outreach more and think like, well, what can I do as a woman in the industry to help my peers? So I think there's a positive side to it that I'm trying to do something, but for the most part, it's quite, I think, distracting from what we're actually trying to do, which is make great games.
Yeah, I think it's scary and it's horrifying. And my biggest fear is that it'll turn off women from coming into the industry because now they think that the industry is populated with people with these opinions. But the truth is, I really think this has spiraled out of control, and it's your typical internet trolls and crazies who have because the industry really has come a long way, and there are flaws for sure in it still with regards to gender equality, but I don't think this movement is representative of the industry as a whole, and I hope it doesn't turn people off from entering it.
Right. One of the things we were kind of, extending this conversation a bit at lunch, we were talking about how in Silicon Beach, there's a couple companies like Tender where there was one of the female original founders, and she was actually very responsible for some of the success of Tender because it was her idea to get Tender into the colleges, and that's actually how it went viral. And unfortunately, she was fired. Nobody even knows that she was a female founder until it came out, and she was so sexually harassed by other leaders within the company that she filed a lawsuit. But she was literally kicked out, and then Snapchat, which is another big company that has a lot of people here in Los Angeles, also had the founder did some really disrespectful conduct with an email. So one of the things that I say is we have to stop this sort of bashing occurring, and we need to change the game, and we need more support around female leaders and female founders. Unfortunately, there's a number, less than 3% of venture capital in 2011 to 2013 was headed by women. So we're not getting a lot of capital. I will say this on a positive note. Pritzker sits on a $9 billion fund. They've been doing a lot more deals in LA. And of the 12 deals in LA that they've done in the past couple years, I want to say about 7 of them are female founders. So The Honest Company, Women.com, Hello Giggles, Vow to be Chic. So there are now, and I know Amplify, so I'm going to put this out there. Amplify is one of the accelerators here in Los Angeles. They have not done a female-based team, and they want to. So they would really like extra nurture. So if anybody has companies, please send them my way, melinda@melindamore.com, to help. So we are getting more people wanting to help women, but it's important because there's still, Emma Watson just spoke at the UN, and she got bashed. So this bashing needs to stop, and we need to, but it's not a gender issue, but everybody needs to get behind and start making a difference in this situation. So just to let people kind of comment on that.
I was venture capitalist for a while. I think that a couple of things. Women very often don't they create a lot of companies, but they don't create the kind that venture capitalists put money into. Women have a tendency to create service companies more than technology companies. And venture capitalists want intellectual property. That's really what they're investing in, is intellectual property. And so women have a tendency not to create companies that generate intellectual property. And it's one of those things where we've got to smarten up the girls. They need to know that that's what they need to do. And even if you want a service business, you figure out some technology, something you can do to support that ends up being a licensable product. So you can get some venture money. But it's disappointing. The other thing I'll say, though, from hearing from other venture capitalists, my sense is that women just are not taken seriously enough when they walk through the door. And there's still that theory they should be teaching high school math. They shouldn't be a double E. They should, how could this technology really be, are you sure you don't need a couple of guys on this team? That would give you a little more weight. So I think that occurs. I know that occurs in Silicon Valley. I know that you go up and down Sand Hill Road, and it can feel daunting to be a woman. I've been on the other side. I have looked for money on Sand Hill Road. It's daunting. It's outrageously intimidating. And no matter how, and I had hard technology, storage technology, RAID-based storage technology. I don't know anything about technology, but I know that. So still, you come in as a woman, and they're looking for the guy. They're looking for the testosterone.
As far as the hiring side of this, you all are here for a breaking down the barriers to entry as the subject matter. If you're a woman candidate and you're the only candidate, and there's 5 other double X chromosomes in the race, tell your story. Talk about your technology background. Talk about what you studied. Talk about what you like. Talk about how you lead teams. Don't be afraid to bring your best game to the opportunity every time, and that includes going right up against the boys and telling your story.
I think, breaking down the barriers, I just, I'm so sorry, it's kind of a big topic, but I have to say this. We take ourselves a little too seriously as women. Boys deal with that environment differently. When you say tell your story, you have to tell it with good humor. Mm-hmm. Women cannot be shrill. We cannot afford to have one shrill moment. We can't afford to be angry. We can't afford to carry baggage into any interview. And particularly in high tech, I said, as a meritocracy, what we have to do, though, is understand that little piece of the culture that men have created and try to figure out how we can appear to take our work very seriously, but not ourselves quite so seriously. We cannot be a drag in the workforce. And I know it's politically incorrect to say you can't be high maintenance or anything. You have to make certain that you compete with men in that one space, which is, can I contribute to this culture in a way that makes it fun for people to work with me? No one ever leads who's not liked. The nuns lied to me. Life is a popularity contest, right? People will not follow you if they don't like you. And women sometimes can get a little too attitudinal. We can get, and you want to break the barrier and get into high tech particularly, you do have to know how to laugh with the boys a little bit. It's a big deal.
But what if you're seen as shrill and you're not? Because sometimes people dump their baggage on you.
Oh, I get that. Yeah. Yeah, you have to make all the time people turn to me and say either, well, you're a woman or you're HR, so you must feel this way. Well, yeah, not so much. No, not so much. So, you just have to correct them, and you have to, and that's kind of a face-to-face thing. You have to say, that's not me. I don't know who you're talking to. So, but that's just it. You have to show that, that people don't have to be on tenterhooks around you, and that you're not first and foremost about the female thing. It's important. We've got to fix all these issues we've talked about. They all have to be fixed. But we also have to remember, we have to have good humor during the period of time. We have to do this with a little grace and not take ourselves too seriously, or people won't want us around, and then we won't ever be able to change the culture. We won't be able to demonstrate what they're missing.
Question.
I just wanted to agree with you, Nancy.
How nice. Wow, that doesn't happen much.
And I'm not just saying this. I'm a former judge pro tem and former practicing attorney. I've been admission to the U.S. Supreme Court, and I'm transitioning everything to be a respected author and transformational speaker. And I figured out, observing the males, as I call them the MB, the male brains, that they need to be humored. If you can humor them, then they will listen. If you build it, they will come. And you have to use, as a female, you have to use that masculine energy in a witty, funny way. If you take yourself too seriously, then you're going to come off, and they're going to tune you out.
Right.
So I didn't want to do this. I was going to do this privately, but when I get ready to launch my new business, Your Moral Compass Counts, the humor in it is I came up with this, and these are all registered trademarks. So I had to put on my lawyer hat is egotistical. And I want the females to use their silent Y, that Y chromosome. So I'm going to hopefully be the next messenger. Get
Tweet that out. Tweet that out.
Tweet that out.
Somebody-
Yeah,
Kevin,
that's right.
Tweet that out.
Yeah.
Oh, we should. Oh, by the way, we should all give our tweet addresses.
That's right.
Yes. In terms of Twitter, though, we should all tell what our Twitter, you know.
You're absolutely right. I just want to say you are so right that I'm not the male brain is completely different. And we
Could I get you to call my husband?
We have such incredibly, I mean, we're two X's. You know, we've got a powerful brain. I don't understand what we're doing wrong or what we're not doing.
Yeah.
This is a deep question. It goes way beyond the subject. of
I know.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Wait, I want to address.
Come on.
Wait,
I want to address her question
yes.
in the red.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm assuming your question in the red that you were just
Yeah.
asking.
So Susan's going to address. Yeah, your
Yes,
question.
about
Yes.
shrill.
in the red.
Yeah,
Shrill.
when you fuchsia.
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 Oh my God! Now I know I'm male. I'm colorblind.
Fuchsia.
Right?
Hashtag not red fuchsia.
Clearly,
There you go. There you go.
Maybe I only have
Practice
1.5
it,
X's.
Practice it.
Come on, shrill.
That is so fun. Go, Susan.
I mean, that might be your first problem right there.
A little picayune there.
But what I would say is, if it was a job interview, right? Women are, if you're, and it's always different if you're an entrepreneur, if you're going to go work at a larger company, established company, right? Assuming if you're going to high tech, there are very few women on the team, and most people do want a balance of the energy. They don't want a bunch of guys all fighting each other to sort of get to the top. So you already have a leg up. Women also can be very intuitive. Like, you can read body language pretty well when you're sort of interviewing someone. And just all you need to think about is, like, these people know that I'm in any high tech job, I'm working 12 to 14 hours a day with this person. And who do I want sitting next to me? You know, it's about being like showing that, hey, I'm going to be kind of a fun, engaging, smart part of the team. And that's really what it's about, because that's when I would interview people, it was like, this person is going to be sitting with these people, understanding what the team chemistry is going to be, because when the chemistry is right among the team, the work product is so much better. So I think you just have to kind of put that into sort of perspective of, like, I'm interviewing to be part of a team and part of a process.
And that's part of your story. And
Right.
you wind a case study of how I did that last time with that last company and who I brought along with me. And that's part of your story.
In the red.
Tip your waitresses.
Yeah, great panel. What are some action steps that can be done to, to fix things? We've talked a lot about what we personally can do in interactions, but what can we do, I guess, in LA to fix some of these things? I mean, I put together Silicon Beach Fest and Melinda and other people.
Very supportive.
We had, a lot of women on the panels. In fact, at our conference, 1 out of every 3 speakers, 100 speakers of the 300 we had were women, which is 33% pretty high for a tech.
Very high.
So thank you, Melinda, for helping out with that. But what are some other things that can be done? I know that in Seattle, they have a lot of young girls coding camps and coding programs. I don't see as many of those in LA. NASA had an open house at JPL 2 weeks ago. There are twice as many dads and sons as moms and daughters, I noticed. That's just, I don't know why moms and daughters didn't bring them there, but there just weren't that many. So what are some other things that can be done, I guess, on a LA scale basis to help? One of the things I have a pet peeve about is when there are women's groups in LA, like 85 Broads or something, they all seem to be like disparaging against women titles. Like they have the word girls in it, like girls in tech, not the just girls in tech, but or 85 Broads. But I don't understand that either. Why can't you just say woman? Bunch of issues.
Yes. Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah, I'm listening to you. The chick word always does find
We have
its way
Chick Launcher
into.
too, which is
I've recently been to Chick Launcher,
understand why it's called Chick Launcher.
and it's broads too. It's
Yeah.
the over.
I don't get it.
I
Why
don't-
do women's groups call themselves these disparaging things? Which if guys said they'd be like tip slap, but the girls call themselves this? I don't get it.
This is a 30,000-foot subject, and women have to look at ourselves.
Yeah, we've gotta
I know.
fix it.
Just as women or something.
Yes.
and rock it. So.
Yeah. To your point earlier about how can we get behind each other, that Snapchat story,
was a bad one. And if we wanted to look at it granularly and try to be helpful at the tiny level, women need to come to each other's side very quickly in these breaking news situations. I think we do ourselves a favor if her people step right in and take that fear and anxiety. I didn't know their home addresses were used, but that must have been really terrifying. And I would like to think we live in a culture in which we're going to step in for our sisters in those moments and take it back. But I think that goes for men as well as women, not just saying like women, but that the men would step in and show like, hey, I support you. Are you okay? Or just true that.
That's what the He for She campaign is, right? Are y'all familiar with
I'm not
the
familiar.
He for She campaign?
No, can you please come up here and have a seat with us? I did have somebody earlier say, how come you guys don't have a man on this panel? Why is this a chick paneled by chicks? Well, come on.
All right, so when, sure.
Yay! In the few shop.
That's right. Crimson. Oh, God, his shoes are
We've
too.
added Kevin to the panel.
Yes, Kevin wins to LA. So the He for She campaign is a campaign that Emma Watson started.
Yes.
When she spoke at the global
UN.
And if anyone hasn't seen this YouTube viral video that's now gone video, I definitely recommend you watch it. In this video, Emma Watson's at the UN, and she's basically calls for men to help support the cause. And if men believe that their wives, that their daughters should get equal pay, should have equal, rights and equal say in the workplace, and who wouldn't want that, then they should do some action, which is basically take a photo of themselves with a piece of paper that says #He for She and share on social media. So she started doing this, and other celebrities started to chime in. This went viral for about a week, not as long as the Ice Bucket Challenge. It lasted about a week. And so if you look for #He for She, you'll see several celebrities, with these pieces of paper saying He for She. But I think that needs to be extended or expanded, or I haven't seen a lot of that action here. So I wonder, like, who's going to take it upon themselves, I guess, to champion these things locally, and get people around that. There could have been like a He for She, meetup or a discussion, or I could have organized a panel, I suppose. But maybe I will. So I guess. So what else can we do?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention was Melinda gave a lot of really nice statistics. I think sometimes it's about going back to our peers in our company and going like rallying and saying, hey, this is good. Like if we want to be relevant in this industry, or to the market, we've got to be appealing to the market, and we should be having these kind of people in our, like, sitting next to us down at the table.
And following up on that, these things sort of sound like numbers to me, and numbers, if it's backed by money or money numbers, really does to propel initiatives. So try to maybe go to your HR and get a line item on their budget for women outreach.
Right.
You see it, and then put a metric around that. How was that money spent? When you do those sort of things, you'll get traction.
Yeah, I also know of 2 startups. One is called Code Academy. It's really using the Kumon model. They just got funded, or they're just going out for their funding right now. They're Series A. There's another startup called CodeSpark, which is really an online sort of coding for kids. And so I think it's also like, these are LA-based companies that are really supporting like tech for everyone, tech for the next generation, and getting behind these types of companies, understanding who they are, putting them on your radar, recommending them to friends who have children, really getting kids 5, 8 years old, so that math becomes really, math, science, coding, it's all the same. It doesn't matter who you are. Some people will take to it, some people won't, and it's really it's not gender biased.
I think that we have to hold men pretty accountable. And to your point about, the husbands and the fathers, fathers need to take their daughters to those events as well. Maybe mom isn't as focused on it. We don't have to have every child line up with the parent of the same gender. An interesting anecdote from my past, I was a senior director in a great big computer company in the 90s, and the CFO happened to be a friend and came to dinner one night. And he turned to my husband and said, Kim, I haven't seen you at any of the Sun Microsystems events. You weren't at the Christmas party, you weren't at last year's this, you weren't at this and that. He named several things, and my husband said to him, that's right, because you pay my wife a lot to deal with your sexism, you pay me nothing to watch it. And the next day, the CFO went and created interestingly enough, a focus group of husbands of the female executives at Sun Microsystems. And those husbands met once a month and advised the male management what it looked like through their lens. It was a much more powerful voice. Now, on one hand, I kind of resented it. You know, really? You had to go to the boys. They're the only one. They had the only legitimate voice. By the same token, I have to say something about the way they presented it did make a huge change in the way the senior execs at Sun began to deal with women. And so, you know, sometimes it takes a man to have to stand up and say, you know, I'm not really liking this. We're underutilizing this asset, or we're not making room for them, or something like that. And so, I mean, I was delighted to see, you know, the 5 of you in the room that are in the room. I wasn't that happy to see Jim, but the rest of you guys, I was very happy to see.
I was going to say that makes sense because a sexist man is not going to hear what a woman has to say.
That's right.
He'll hear it from a man.
That's right.
That's unfortunately the way it is. Yeah.
He for she.
He for she.
Yeah,
he
Right
for
back
she.
to that.
And you could do that at the very micro level. Go find a good buddy at work. You know, someone who can help you. I mean, it's, you know, the bonding with women, of course, we've got to do it. But the truth is, I've learned more about how to manage through the male world by having a good buddy who was a man that I could say, you know, here's my dilemma. I can't seem to get heard here. And I've had male coaches that have done great things for me, and female coaches that have done great things for me, but and end up being my advocate. So to that point, men own some of this. We have to make them take accountability.
I think that's one issue with a lot of women's groups being called chick luncher or these other things, in addition to being somewhat self-disparaging, as I think a lot of men don't feel that they're welcome or comfortable at those events, and so they don't come. So they don't hear what's going on, and it's women talking to each other who already get it, but the men don't ever get it because they feel unwelcome. So I don't know what can be done about that, but.
But on the flip side of that, then if you don't, unfortunately that's the case, if you don't have something that women can relate to, the whole purpose is to get them more involved. And it starts, honestly, it starts from high school. And I say that because I used to do beauty pageants, and a lot of my advocacy was going out to the school and talking to the girls and saying, you know, sometimes being the smartest girl doesn't make you the most popular girl. Just by saying that, you should see how they light up, because at that point it's like, how do I find that mix between being accepted by my peers and, you know, also being intelligent? So it starts there. So how do you find that balance of appealing to these girls and saying, okay, chicks for coding or girls in coding? So you have to find a way that's going to appease them too, especially in the millennial hashtag driven kind of world that we live in. You know, it has to come across as being cool to them to be affiliated. So I see what you're saying too, but you also don't want to alienate girls, because a lot of times it is very intimidating for them to step out into that a high-tech field. It can be very intimidating for a 13, 14-year-old girl, which is, you know, you want to start at that age too. Don't leave them out.
Yeah, but also the fact that, like, even though we have this scenario and guys do get it, even at an early age or later, they still rally together and bully the person. Even if you're a cool chick, you're smart, you're this, even if they're not upfront with you in a passive aggressive way, they do that. And that's how it demises somebody, especially a high power thinking woman. It doesn't embraces them. And so you have like hashtag Gamergate, where you get a lot of men who think that it's okay because they see it in the video games and they see it at Call of Duty, they see it at like Pimps and Hoes and all these other things. And once you say no, and you're on TED Talk where everybody says, oh yeah, but in reflection of that, they don't do it, you know? And then if you see Candy Crush, who's the most prominent players? Older women, 68%. And that's where readily the gaming industry or entertainment, they don't gravitate. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. We're going to do what we're going to do. Even if you call to action, you have to get those executives like, you know, Hodge says, get them to believe and understand on their level, like, hey, let's have a conversation one-on-one. I'm an executive, you're an executive. I'm a man, I'm a man. And I think that calls for a huge acceptance of this conversation, more readily available and continuous conversation on that. And NASA's commander right now is a woman. Absolutely. And what I'm trying to say is that, I see that you want to take the girl, the chicks and all that out of the title, but at the same time, the question comes, how do you also appeal to that particular demographic? So how do you,
I think, the language, the chicks and broads and all that, my sense is that it's actually like any minority that uses the disparaging term to self
within themselves.
Right. Because what you want to do is, stop having the electricity around that. And so we use the disparaging term, again, A, to show we're not taking ourselves that seriously, and B, we're going to use the disparaging term and turn it into the powerful term.
Yeah.
And it is a take back of power. And so, I don't like any of those terms, but I don't really like the woman thing either,
Let's figure out the word. What's the word going to be?
Figure it out.
We have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to take 2 more questions. So in the front, right there.
Yeah, piggybacking off of what you just said, it's not that we're disparaging ourselves. It might look like that to you men, but we're trying to take back the power on those terms because we are the ones that can reclaim that power. You guys cannot. Sorry, you can't. This is ours. So it may not make you that comfortable. It may make you kind of look at us a little weird, but we're trying to reclaim the power over those words and use them in positive ways. Instead of turning them into weapons, as you guys have. So.
I'm not going to use them.
I think from a male perspective, they are, of course, it's taking back the power, and the initiative behind it is merit-worthy, of course. But I think to the male ear, well, it's just a passive-aggressive way of assuming a disparaging name, rather than just being open about the issue in the past. It's the N-word. It's all of these things that are very sensitive and difficult for us to deal with.
You could. Sorry.
There you go.
I just want to do. I think you had a question, right? Okay, and then we'll do these last 2 questions.
Okay, I just wanted to see if any of you have think that it's gotten better. And I'll give you an example. When I was many years ago, when I was pregnant with my son, who's now 22, I was in an office and the people around me weren't really that supportive. And as time has gone by, a lot of women who are pregnant and they get a lot of support. You get to see all the baby pictures and everything else. In the context, and I've worked in digital and in IT most of my career. So I think that it has gotten better. Now you can be the proud mom instead of hiding the fact that you were a mother or that you have to have a kid who's sick and have to leave or what have you. And unfortunately, I was a single parent, so it made matters a little bit more daunting. But I do believe that it has gotten better because in the last 15 years, I've seen a lot more support.
Somebody want to take that on?
I'm going to go. It has gotten better. At our lunch previously, we each one had our own horror story on different levels of that conversation and have our own to tell. But I think it is better. I'd have to maybe say thank you to social media a tiny bit for that. But yeah, the pregnant woman, going down the hallway at the office in 2014 is much less of a giant road show, perhaps, than she was 15 years ago.
And I will say that it starts in the home. My son is very supportive of causes.
Of your pregnancies? He's a cool guy.
Did you have a question? I do. Yeah, and then that's the last one. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. This has been so eye-opening. I've taken many notes, and I love all the questions and comments. I actually I'm a creator, a writer, and a parent of a female teen who is really smart in tech. Really smart in math, really smart in science. I've been trying for 3 years to get her into coding, right? I hear these things. I take her girls in tech, all these different things. Zero interest. And even though she does play some games, the main reason is because there are really no great girl games. So to inspire her,
I totally disagree. I will give you some awesome recommendations.
No.
Oh no, neither am I. I'm going to give you a whole list. It's going to be awesome.
Do you want to come talk to us after?
Yeah.
We can help
Come
you.
chat with us.
You'll get a list.
These girls will fix you up. fix you up.
Okay, you come talk to us after as well.
Yeah, there's also a startup called Nix Hydra, which just got $5 million. It's founded by 2 women who make games for girls.
But I think it's also, I heard a really interesting article or an interesting story on NPR. Women are problem solvers. So if you look at like what WordPress has done for websites, when you look at how much easier it is to develop apps, women are going to start, your daughter, a lot of women are going to develop apps because they want to solve a problem. I mean, why did Honest Company exist, right? Because she had all these allergies, all these stuff, right? So I think it's about what does your daughter want to do that doesn't exist? And she'll go create that. And then she'll want to get the tools to create that. She'll be like, oh God, if I could just have an app that would do this. That's how she's going to get into coding. A lot of women's going to be something kind of more organic of like, I want something that doesn't exist, so I've got to go make it.
Absolutely.
Last thing. Sorry.
So one thing really quick that I wanted to say, going back to the point about telling the story, is that these are all really important things, and we obviously all want the best for women in the workplace. What we're all here to do is to make a company more successful than it is currently. And so if we can frame the story outside of this room as diversity of perspective is better for your bottom line.
Yes.
Women in the room is better for your bottom line for X, Y, and Z reasons. I think it'll go a long way.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you.